that. I did want to just briefly at least touch on the story of inflation because this is a big deal. Now, if you saw the Federal Reserve raised interest rates 25 basis points, I mean, that sounds like a lot. It's almost like 25%, right? 25 basis points, that's what they call it. They try to make it sound bigger. Because if they were to say the actual percentage, 25 basis points is 0.25%. So it's 1/4%. That's not very much. That's not going to get inflation under control. If you remember back in the early 80s, Paul Volcker came in because of the 70s. We had some inflation problems. Inflation in this country was getting out of control. Paul Volcker came in with Reagan and put interest rates up to 17, I forget the exact percent, 17, 18%. He raised the interest rates. The Fed did. They came in and raised the interest rates, got inflation under control. You know what happened? The economy started booming after that. Amazing how that works, isn't it? Well, we can't do that today, right? We absolutely can't do that. First of all, a couple of things you need to know about. In just the past 2 years, our federal debt is up by a third. In 2 years, 1/3, 35%, okay? When you look at the debt, that's a big issue when you talk about the interest rates because we have to pay debt service. We have to pay interest on the debt. So the interest rate's a pretty big deal, right? So we're at about 23.8 trillion, 24 trillion approximately is our federal debt. Think about this. Our tax receipts by the federal government from payroll and federal income tax. Yeah, you've got it. See, yours shows over 30 trillion. That may be household debt inclusive in that number. In any event, total tax receipts, payroll taxes, and income taxes are about 3.8 trillion a year. So if we did nothing else but spend those on paying down the debt, we'd be paying for 6 years, right, as it is. Is that right? Yeah, 6 years approximately. Round numbers. 4, 24, 6 years. All right, so we've been paying for 6 years just to pay it down. Now, here's the problem. If you raise interest rates by 0.25% or 1/4%, that's approximately equivalent to $58 billion in debt service, right? So now think about, okay, what's the highest that we could raise interest rates today? I mean, I don't know what that number is, but let's say we raised them up to 16%. Let's say we raised them like Paul Volcker did to 17%. You know, at 16%, 100% of our income and payroll tax receipts of $3.8 trillion would have to go just towards the interest payment. Just towards the interest payment on the debt. That doesn't pay for any of our ongoing operations in this country. So we are functionally bankrupt in this country. They cannot raise the interest rates to the level that they need to raise them to fight inflation because we can't afford the debt service if they do that. So we're in a deeply, deeply troubling negative feedback loop of continued borrowing to fund our previous borrowing. That's never going to work. You can't borrow your way out of debt, in other words, right? I mean, anybody that watches Dave Ramsey's show knows that. You can't borrow your way out of debt, and yet that's our strategy, apparently. One other thing I wanted to point out to you, because you talk about inflation, and it's hitting us everywhere, and we've talked about it a lot on this show. Where's the inflation coming from? It's coming from the currency. It's coming from the monetary supply. This is coming from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a private corporation. People don't know this. It's not a part of the government. The Federal Reserve is a totally private entity. Yeah, it's called federal, but that doesn't mean it's part of the government. It's got a governor, but that doesn't mean that it's not a private entity. And they set the monetary policy. In the last 2 years, Jerome Powell and the Fed, they have created as much currency as was created between the founding of our country and the year 2004. And I want you to think about that.
That's too scary to think about.
Between the late 1700s and 2004, they made as much currency as we've made and injected into our system in just the last 2 years. That's what's causing inflation, folks. It's never going to stop when we're printing money like we are. This 0.25% increase in interest rates ain't going to cut it. We're in deep, deep trouble. I wish we could tell you more about that, but that's all we got time for today, folks. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.